Cain later, the imperial guard of slave origin, was breathing his last while protecting the mad emperor who had made a pact with a demon until the very end. In those final moments, Cain wondered how history would remember him. Would he be remembered as a knight who maintained his loyalty until death? Or would he be labeled a foolish loser who failed to read the currents of his time? Neither of these options appealed to him. Halo Reston, the leader of the rebel army, appeared before him, shouting angrily and exhaustedly, questioning why Cain had changed the path of his sword at the crucial moment. Cain believed it was better to simply disappear from everyone's memory. Cain, who had lived 29 years as an orphan, considered this fate his own choice and asked Reston, whom he addressed as the young master of the Duke's house, not to start a pointless fight. Reston continued to scream in anguish, asking him why he didn't run away, and instead made this decision, then embraced him as he was dying, pleading with him to open his eyes and rise. After his death, Cain found himself walking in a surreal space resembling a vast expanse of water under a star-studded sky, wondering if this was death. He felt that the freedom he had gained was not as wonderful as he had imagined, and as he was thinking about Reston and how he had cried for him, reassuring himself that his friend would be fine on his own, a violent flash of energy struck him. Suddenly, his soul was transferred into the body of a newborn baby, and he heard a man's voice welcoming him to the world by the name of Karen. While Cain was in a state of shock and disbelief, an elderly man who looked like an older version of Reston held him and congratulated him on his courage for not crying, wishing for him to grow up healthy as his youngest grandson. This immense shock caused the infant Karen to burst into tears as he realized deep down the astonishing truth that he had been reborn as Reston's grandson. 45 years after those events, 10-year-old Karen Reston, the only son of Count Bali, the third son of Halo Reston, was receiving a history lesson. The teacher was explaining the modern historical society's view of the knight Cain later, who died with the evil emperor. The teacher explained that although Cain failed to prevent his master from treading the path of evil, he remains to this day a symbol of loyalty, because he stayed by his master's side until the end. When the teacher asked Karen for his opinion, Karen first asked the teacher for his opinion. The teacher gave the prevailing view, believing that the Grand Duke Halo wanted to restore the Moron of his close friend, citing the famous story of their friendship. But Karen surprised his teacher with a completely different opinion, stating that he believed his grandfather Halo hated his dead friend, and that he deliberately polished Cain's name, and embellished his reputation for this very reason. The teacher was surprised by Cain's words, and asked him what he meant. Karen explained his theory, saying that his grandfather could not forgive Cain for his decision to choose death instead of joining him on the path of revolution, thereby ignoring Cain's own wish to die quietly without being made a hero. The teacher was astonished but remembered unofficial records stating that the duel between Halo and Cain ended too quickly for their comparable skills. The teacher realized that if one assumed Cain deliberately chose death over fighting his friend, Karen's argument became very compelling, and he marveled at a 10-year-old's ability to reach such a profound conclusion. The teacher felt extremely flustered, thinking to himself that if he agreed with this impudent opinion, the Duke's knights might cut off his head for less majesty, as he stammered, admitting he had never considered this viewpoint. Karen suddenly burst out laughing. He then revealed he was just joking, wondering why his teacher was so surprised. Afterward, Karen returned his thoughts to his current situation, confirming to himself that his name was now Karen Reston, the youngest grandson of the Duke Reston's family. It took him some time to grasp the situation, but he eventually came to the realization that he had been reborn as Halo Reston grandson. He wondered angrily how that fool dared to turn him into a hero against his explicit wishes. He should have understood without it being said. Later, Karen found his father Bali, Halo's youngest son, praying. After his lesson ended, Karen approached him, and asked his father if he was worried about the upcoming awakening ceremony. Bali apologized to his son, and when Karen asked why, the father expressed his concern that he might have passed on his limitations, as he had been unable to awaken his magical power, unlike his uncles. Karen warmly reassured his father, affirming that no matter what anyone said, he was the best father to him. Bali was deeply moved by his son's words, embraced him in tears, and told him he was also the best son to him. He then affectionately asked him what he wanted for dinner, to which Karen enthusiastically replied that he wanted meat, of course. In his room, as Karen lay thinking about the awakening ceremony, memories of his past life as Cain returned, he remembered a conversation with a young Halo, where the concept of an awakening ceremony was foreign to him. Halo explained it was an ancient ritual in their family to unleash latent magical power. Cain scoffed at the idea, expressing his disinterest in powers one is born with a silver spoon. Halo explained that not everyone could awaken their power, and even those who didn't automatically become the head of the family. Halo then tried to pique Cain's interest by talking about an amazing secret passed down only to the family head. Cain curiously asked if this secret was a great treasure or a magic book that grants wishes, To which Halo replied in the affirmative. Cain admitted a slight interest, explaining his real dream was to live quietly in a secluded place. After Halo laughed at his dream, Cain pretended to be angry at his friend's joke. So Halo seriously promised that when he became the family head one day, he would make a special exception and tell him the secret. Karen's thoughts returned to the present as he sat in his room, thinking about the magic power awakening ceremony. He decided to himself that his father had no reason to worry. Blue energy and lightning began to surround his body as he revealed the truth that he had already awakened his magical power long ago. In a later scene, Karen was with his parents, looking in awe and admiration at a technologically advanced train, expressing his amazement as it was the first time he had seen one. His mother proudly told him that many of the technologies used in making this train were commercialized thanks to his father Bali's personal patronage. The father tried to be humble and downplay his achievement, but his mother insisted it was amazing. Karen agreed with her, declaring with all sincerity that he was very proud of his father. Karen continued his thoughts on the train, admiring his father, who despite not having awakened his magical power, was an amazing man who single-handedly managed 30% of the Reston Duchy's financial affairs. With an ever-affectionate mother and a father devoted to his family, Karen concluded that they were truly perfect parents. As the train continued its journey, Karen spotted a massive castle looming in the distance through the window. It was the main residence of the Reston family, Kyonghi Castle. Karen felt a mixture of anticipation and anger as he thought about his grandfather Halo Reston being in that place. His anger flared internally, wondering how Halo dared to turn him into a great historical figure remembered in history against his will. At that moment, Caron released a small amount of magical energy, waking his father, and at that moment, Karen made a firm decision to become a constant nuisance to his grandfather, and to be the biggest delinquent in the history of the Reston family. Karen vowed to his grandfather in his mind, telling him to wait and see what his dear youngest grandson, who was on his way, would do. When the train arrived at the station, a welcoming party was there to greet them. Karen's father exchanged greetings with a man named Heinrich, who expressed his constant gratitude for the Duke's family's generosity. The Seawolf Knights at the station caught Karen's attention. As he noticed they were different from the knights in his region, he wondered if they had felt the mana he had already awakened. But he didn't care about the possibility of the news reaching his grandfather, considering it only a matter of time. The family was guided into the main castle, specifically to a spacious reception room, where Karen was asked to wait while Count Bali went to greet the family elders. Karen felt bored waiting in the vast room, and wished he had asked to go to the library instead. Suddenly, another boy in the room interrupted his thoughts, mocking him by saying the rumors were true, that Karen was indeed a bookworm, as the first thing he asked for upon arrival was the library. The boy then insulted Karen and his father, saying that since he was from his uncle Bali's lineage, his chances of awakening mana were slim, so it was better for him to study to make money like the common folk, just like his father. This insult angered Caron, who coolly asked the boy if he wanted to fight. The boy was surprised by his reaction but gathered a little mana, thinking he would give Karen the upper hand, but Karen calmly wondered if there was a troublemaker being raised in the main house, then unleashed an aura of his own mana, leaving the boy completely stunned. The boy asked in shock when and how Karen had awakened his mana, to which Karen replied with a smile that his father didn't know anything about it either. Karen then told his cousin, whom he addressed as brother, that they had a problem. Karen announced that there was no need for two troublemakers in the family, and that he would take that role for himself, so the other should make way for him. Leaving his cousin frozen in place with fear, Karen unleashed a terrifying aura around him and suggested to his cousin Leo that they have a little fight. Elsewhere in the castle, the eldest uncle Tails Reston sat with his two brothers. Heinrich was informed that Karen had already awakened his mana, which the third knight commander confirmed. The second uncle, Raphael Reston, commented that Karen had hidden his mana awakening from the main house, questioning the intentions of their brother Bali, whom he called a failure. Bali seemed genuinely surprised, confirming he didn't know either. Tails scolded his brother Raphael for his haste, pointing out that it wasn't strange for the failure not to know since he himself couldn't awaken mana, then described the whole situation as pathetic. Suddenly, a servant burst into the room in a panic, asking the head butler to come quickly, then called out for the young master Raphael. Halo Reston muttered that a misunderstanding had occurred. Raphael realized it was about his son and stood up angrily. Meanwhile, in the reception room, Leo was lying on the ground defeated. When Raphael arrived and saw the scene, he grabbed Karen in anger, calling him an ill-mannered pup, and asked him what he was thinking. At that moment, Bali and Tails arrived. Karen calmly replied that it was because Leo had insulted his father. Karen wondered in front of his uncle if he would have remained silent if he were in his place. Raphael claimed that Karen was spouting nonsense, grabbed Karen and turned to Bali, telling him to shut up and that all of this happened because of his failure to raise his son. The head butler intervened at that moment, asking everyone to stop. announcing that the master of the house Halo would judge the matter himself. Raphael was ordered to let go of Karen, which he did reluctantly. Bali rushed to his son to check on him, and Karen assured him he was fine. After that, the head butler asked them all to go see the master of the house. As they walked down the long corridor, Karen thought to himself that it had been a long time since he last saw Halo. Upon entering the study, Halo, sitting behind his desk, confronted them with a direct question to Karen, asking why he had caused such a big incident immediately upon arrival. Bali tried to defend his son, but Halo silenced him sternly, asserting that he hadn't asked him and that he would hear the answer directly from his son. Halo told Karen that he knew he wasn't reckless enough to cause trouble without thinking of the consequences, and asked him for a detailed explanation of his actions. Karen was internally surprised by Halo's willingness to listen to him before punishing him, describing it to himself as an inappropriate display of chivalry. Karen then repeated his answer clearly, saying that Leo had insulted his father. Raphael exploded in anger again, accusing Karen of lying and demanding he tell the truth. At that, Halo slammed his fist on the desk and yelled at Raphael to be silent, questioning how he dared to raise his voice in his presence. Raphael apologized to his father Halo, who decided to summon Leo to confirm the facts and ordered Heinrich to bring him as soon as his treatment was finished. But before that, Halo turned his attention to Karen, pointing out that the matter of the insult wasn't all he wanted to ask about. Karen anticipated his grandfather's question, and cheerfully announced that if he was asking about Mana, he had awakened it 3 years ago, shocking those present. Halo asked him why he had hidden it even from his father for all this time, wondering to himself about this boy who had awakened Mana on his own at such a young age. Karen explained that he didn't realize it was Mana until he read about it in a book later, and when his grandfather pressed him to know what happened next, Karen smiled innocently and said he just wanted to keep it a secret. He added that secrets are fun, and that it was more amusing because the knights in his region had no idea. Halo asked him if that was all, and Karen cheerfully confirmed it. At that moment, Leo arrived, his wounds bandaged, and Halo immediately asked him if he had indeed insulted his uncle. Karen began an elaborate theatrical performance, speaking with feigned sadness about Leo's insult to his father, describing him as a vulgar man who only cares about money. Karen then continued by describing his own father as incompetent and arrogant, wondering how much grief he would feel if his father died without seeing the light. He then concluded his speech by admitting that despite all that, he shouldn't have hit Leo, and that he had committed a great sin. Leo was horrified by this twisted speech and vehemently denied saying it. At that, Karen released a burst of his energy to intimidate his cousin. Halo calmly asked Leo if what Karen said was true, and Leo fearfully admitted that it was. After hearing the confession, Halo decided that since the awakening ceremony was the next day, he would postpone both boys' punishment until after the ceremony, and order them to go rest. Later that night, Halo asked his servant Heinrich for his opinion on Bali's son. Heinrich replied diplomatically that he felt there were many aspects to the boy that might interest the master of the house. Halo agreed, describing Karen as an interesting boy, not only because he awakened Mana on his own and hid it for 3 years, but also because he subtly criticized the level of the knights in his father's territory, which Halo took as a hint that he himself had been neglecting his son Bali. Although Heinrich thought his master was overthinking it, Halo insisted that this grandson was different. Halo said they would discover Karen's true nature, and whether he possessed something special at the next day's ceremony, expressing his intense curiosity about whether he would finish the ceremony safely, and what he would gain from it. Later that night, the entire family gathered in an outdoor location in preparation for the ceremony. Karen noticed the elders of the Reston family in their robes and felt their immense power despite their retirement. He also saw all the family members present, Tails and his daughter Leon, and Raphael and his son Leo. Karen realized this ceremony was more important than he had thought. In the center of the gathering was a stone platform, on which was placed a large black stone, which Karen immediately recognized as the Oath Stone. Halo announced the start of the eye-opening ritual, explaining that when Karen passes through the rift opened by the Oath Stone, he will enter a world the stone will show him. He explained that this world differs from person to person, and the ritual will end when Karen shatters that world using the weapon of clear insight he will acquire there. After Karen confirmed his readiness, Halo used a necklace to activate the Oath Stone, from which a pillar of blue energy shot out, opening a glowing rift in the air. As Bali held his son's shoulder anxiously, he asked him if he was scared, and if he would really be okay. Karen reassured his father that he would be fine and promised to return. Karen thought about the task required of him to shatter the world with a weapon he acquires, and considered it an easy task, assuring himself that breaking things had always been his specialty. From a distance, Halo wished in his heart for his grandson to overcome his fear. As soon as Karen stepped through the rift, he found himself in a familiar and horrifying place, the Imperial Palace, burning and filled with the bodies of his dead comrades. He wondered angrily why the stone was showing him these painful memories, and whether the intention was to make him feel guilty for his comrades who died unjustly. Karen heard a mysterious voice describing his world as tragic and desolate, calling him the child of the blue wolf. The voice told him the time of the covenant had come, and that he would fulfill what he had pledged with his ancestor. Karen asked the unknown voice if it was a demon, but the voice denied it, asserting that vile demons would not dare defile the blood that runs in his veins. The voice urged Karen to overcome his fear and ascend to the throne, where what he desired awaited. When Karen reached the throne, which the emperor had wanted to protect so desperately that he made a deal with a demon, and as he walked up the stairs leading to it, he felt as if he were walking over their corpses. Remembering that he had never imagined this would be the cause of their deaths, he found his old weapon there. The voice welcomed him as a representative of the Blue Wolf clan, and told him this was his weapon. Karen immediately recognized his beloved sword given to him by the emperor, the demonic sword Ruin. The voice asked him to imbue it with mana, but Karen objected, saying the sword devour its user's soul. The voice reassured him that the demonic will that once inhabited the sword had already been annihilated by his grandfather, and what he was seeing was merely a distorted form left by the demon's curse, and that he was the only one capable of awakening it. Karen hesitated, wondering if touching the sword was safe. Afraid of returning to the person he once was, who obeyed the emperor's orders and took countless lives. At that moment, Halo's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to overcome his fear. Karen finally understood the true meaning of Halo's unusual kindness. The purpose of the eye-opening ritual was not just to obtain a weapon, but for the heir who awakens the mana of clear insight, to overcome their greatest fear. Armed with this understanding, Karen reached his hand confidently towards his sword. As soon as Karen gripped the sword, an immense blue energy he recognized as the mana of clear insight flooded him, and the sword shape began to change in his hand. The mysterious voice told him it didn't know why the sword appeared to him in its former guise Ruin, but it explained that this sword originally belonged to his ancestor Rael. The voice mentioned that the reason this sword was not recorded in history books, unlike the other sword Graham that Halo took, was that its power possessed a nature completely different from that of the family. Karen felt intense pain as the latent mana in the sword began to etch itself into his body, but the voice ordered him to endure. Karen noticed the flow of mana in his body becoming more ferocious, and he asked the voice for the sword's true name. The voice revealed that this sword was the execution sword Guillotine, the blade that had beheaded countless demons and devoured their powers, to the point that the demons themselves forgot its existence out of sheer fear. Karen contemplated his weapon's new name. The voice commented that a sword resembling the darkness of the deep sea perfectly suited Karen's destiny. Karen asked about the voice's identity, guessing it might be the blue dragon, the guardian dragon of their house, but the voice replied that Karen did not yet possess enough power to bear its true name, and invited him to visit it in the North Sea one day when he gains the strength to rule the seas. Afterward, Karen asked how to leave this world, and the voice pointed out that he already knew the answer. Karen realized what he had to do: shatter the world as he was told at the beginning of the ritual. With great enthusiasm, he declared that he had always wanted to try that, then swung the sword powerfully, shattering the illusory world around him. In the real world, Halo was consoling the anxious Bali, admitting that it is painful for a father to see his son walk a path he could not, but he stressed that these are the moments when one must prove their resolve. Suddenly, the oath stone began to crack violently, and Leo shouted, alerting his grandfather that the stone was breaking. In a moment of general shock, the stone completely shattered. Karen appeared in a flash of light where the broken stone had been, holding his new sword. He looked around with a smile and asked what had happened to the oath stone, noting that it was broken. Bali confronted him angrily, demanding to know what he did. Karen replied cheerfully as he raised the sword high, announcing that it was the execution sword Guillotine of our ancestor Rael Reston. These words stunned Halo and the elders. This legendary blade had been erased from the family's history, its existence passed down only orally to the patriarch and the elders. They all wondered why it had appeared now, while Halo pondered whether the time of the covenant was approaching. Halo finally asked his grandson if he was afraid of this sword, to which Karen replied with complete confidence no. After Halo processed the situation, he began to think about ancient history. A long time ago their ancestors made a covenant with the blue dragons to annihilate the demons, and as a token of this covenant, they left behind the oath stone, awaiting the descendant who would one day fulfill the promise. Halo looked at his grandson Karen, wondering if he was the one destined to fulfill this promise. Accordingly, Halo raised his hand and officially declared that Karen, son of Bali Reston, as the one chosen by the execution sword Guillotine, was a legitimate member of Cheong Castle and a direct heir qualified to inherit the initiation rites. These words angered Raphael, who objected to granting these rights to such a brat. Meanwhile, Bali rushed to check on his son, but Karen assured him he was unharmed. Tails, the eldest uncle, was deep in thought, admitting to himself that he had never heard of this legendary sword before, and that its aura alone was bone-chilling. In his mind, Tails addressed his brother Bali, warning him that he would not let the matter of succession be affected by a new variable like his son, even though Karen was now walking a path no one had before. After that, Halo declared the eye-opening ceremony over and ordered everyone to return. As they were leaving, Raphael angrily confronted his older brother Tails, asking if he was just going to stand by, to which Tails calmly replied that they would sit and talk soon. Raphael thought that even someone as greedy as Tails felt the danger. Raphael expressed his confusion and anger, wondering why Bali's son was chosen of all people. Tails advised him that the most important thing now was not to fight among themselves. When it was time for his parents to leave, Bali asked his son with concern if he would be alright on his own. Heinrich reassured him that Cheong Castle was the safest place. Bali agreed that the castle was safe from external threats, but expressed his worry about internal ones, though he added that his brothers wouldn't dare act recklessly in their father's presence. Heinrich approached them and informed them that Lady Sabina would oversee Karen's initiation rites. Both Karen and his father felt relieved. Sabina Reston, Halo's younger sister, was known for skills that were no less than her brother's, and she was nicknamed the White Wolf. Bali advised his son to be respectful with her, and Karen promised he would. Before leaving, Heinrich relayed a final message from Halo, stating that a permanent residence for Bali's family would be prepared in the castle, and they could visit any time. Bali was deeply moved by this gesture from his father and thanked Heinrich, saying he could now leave in peace. He bid farewell to his son, asking him to take care of himself and to turn to him when needed. After the train departed, Heinrich led Karen through the castle, saying that Lady Sabina was waiting for him. Before they arrived, Heinrich gave Karen a piece of advice, asking him to avoid calling Lady Sabina by the title grandmother because she hated that title intensely. Karen thanked him for the advice, though he wondered to himself about the strangeness of it. They then arrived at the Spirit Training Hall in Cheong Forest, a place only the direct bloodline was allowed to enter. Heinrich told Karen that Lady Sabina was waiting for him inside, and that Lord Leo was also there, at the special request of his father Raphael. Karen was delighted to hear this and went inside, while Heinrich commented to himself that things were about to get noisy again. Karen felt a tremendous mana aura emanating from the hall even before he entered. When he opened the door, he announced his arrival, greeting the White Wolf, and a sharp voice from inside ordered him to enter without delay. Karen was surprised by Lady Sabina's youthful appearance. She welcomed him and asked if he was surprised that she didn't look as he had imagined. Sabina commented on how quickly time passed as Bali's sweet son had already grown up. Karen immediately realized that her eternal youth was due to reconstructing her body with mana, an ability possessed only by those at the 8-star master level. Sabina ordered Karen to sit cross-legged next to Leo. Karen complied and whispered to his nervous cousin that they would be seeing a lot of each other from now on and that he was looking forward to it. Sabina commented on his knowledge of her title. So Karen told her he had read about it in history books because he liked them. Sabina smiled and said that just as her brother Halo described, he was indeed an interesting boy. When Karen asked her what his grandfather had said, she relayed his message. He's a boy you'll like very much, and added that she now understood why after seeing him for herself. Sabina recalled her conversation with Halo, who described Karen as a child who must sail across a vast sea, and asked her to be his lighthouse to guide him so he could rule that ocean. Sabina saw in Karen an immense potential like the open sea, wild and infinite. And though he was still unpolished, he might one day rule an entire generation. She considered meeting this interesting boy an amusing affair. Sabina began the lesson, explaining that sitting cross-legged was the foundation of mana cultivation, and that once they passed the preliminary stage, they would be able to cultivate mana without needing to sit, just as she does. She then released a wave of clear sea mana that amazed the boys. Sabina explained the Sea Overlord method, which is based on creating an ocean of mana within the body and controlling it. She explained that a person's strength increases with the number of oceans they control. Controlling 8 oceans means reaching the rank of 8 stars. As for mastering those 8 oceans as one vast sea, that is the realm of 9 stars. She added that there were only 3 people on the entire continent who had reached this level and only 1 within the empire. Karen immediately realized that this person was his grandfather Halo. Sabina confirmed that the only 9-star expert on the continent was her brother Halo Reston. This statement ignited a flame of determination in Karen, who swore that in this life he would definitely catch up to his grandfather. Sabina noticed this intense desire for power in the boy, and found him truly amusing. Believing he would be worthy of training, Sabina began the mana training, ordering the boys to pour mana into the channels that were opened during the awakening ceremony, reminding them that the power of mana should not be controlled, but accepted. Sabina watched their mana waves, and Karen noticed that his mana waves were still a bit rough, and she guided him to start from the heart first. Sabina was immediately impressed by Karen's ability, wondering how this could be the power of someone who had just finished the awakening ceremony. She compared him to Leo, who had barely begun to approach the 2-star level. Despite having received the Sea Overlord method 2 years ago, in contrast, Karen, without any instruction, was instinctively carving his own mana paths. Karen felt intense pressure as if his body were being torn apart, so he stopped cultivating on his own. Sabina initially thought his body was exhausted, but she realized he had masterfully adjusted his pace. At that moment, Leo collapsed from overusing his mana, and Sabina rushed to him, scolding him for forcing his mana. Sabina admitted to herself that she had been distracted by watching Karen. She saw that the role of adults was to prevent children from harming themselves due to their recklessness. Karen looked at Leo with disappointment, describing him as shameful. Sabina compared Leo to Karen, who had accurately assessed his limits and stopped before getting hurt. She was impressed by his self-control despite his desire for power, and began to wonder if this child really needed a lighthouse to guide him. Sabina addressed Karen, promising to ensure his safety for 3 years, asking him to focus on building his strength during this period so he could protect himself. Karen agreed enthusiastically. Later in the dueling training ground, Leo approached Karen and asked if he planned to use the guillotine sword even in training. Karen replied, wondering if there was a problem with that, explaining that his grandfather had given him a special scabbard to contain the sword's aura. The new instructor approached them and introduced himself, who would be training the boys in swordsmanship. As the commander of the Seawolf Knights, Xerus Winterguard, Karen greeted Sir Xerus politely, noting to himself that he was an 8-star expert. Xerus told the boys he would not address them by the title Young Master, until they earned the recognition of the Seawolf Knights. Karen replied that he didn't mind and found it more comfortable, adding that he was well aware that earning the respect of the Blue Wolves through skill is a tradition in the Liston family. Xerus was surprised by Karen's unusual reaction, noting that most nobles would have been offended. Sir Xerus initially thought that perhaps a serious and steadfast heir had finally arrived for the family after a long wait, but Karen was confidently thinking to himself that in the end, everyone would bow before him. Upon noticing this aura, Xerus immediately changed his mind, concluding that the one who had arrived was not a serious heir, but someone worse than Leo, a true scoundrel. Meanwhile, Sabina was warning her brother Halo, advising him to think about Karen's impact on the succession structure, and what it would mean for Halo's own son. Halo wondered if his sister was implying that his son might be threatened by his nephew. Sabina clarified that if Karen's exceptional talent became known throughout the Empire, it would obviously affect who would succeed him and what would happen next. Sabina was speaking with her brother Halo, expressing her concern that their family might end now that the Oath Stone had been shattered, especially with the number of demons coming from beyond the North Sea increasing significantly. Halo dismissed this idea as nonsense and revealed a secret prophecy known only to the head of the family. The person who breaks the stone will establish a new stone just as their ancestor did long ago. Sabina realized this meant the time of the covenant was near. When she asked him when he would tell Karen this, Halo replied that it would happen when the time is right. In the winter, Bali was reading a letter from his son Karen. Karen wrote to reassure his father of his well-being and told him about his training progress, having recently mastered the 4th form of 2 different swordsmanship styles. He also mentioned that he was trying to get along with his relatives as his father had asked, and that he was taking special care of Leo. At the end of the letter, he jokingly asked for more money because his allowance had run out, which made Bali laugh with affection. In a conversation with Heinrich, Bali recalled how worried he was when he first left Karen at the castle 3 years ago. Heinrich reassured him that Karen had adapted surprisingly well, and that the castle was no longer quiet because of him. Although Bali tried to advise his son not to attract attention, Heinrich wisely replied that a jewel will shine even if it stays in place, but Heinrich warned that the situation might change, as it would soon be impossible to prevent the news about Karen from spreading, and that as a blue wolf, he would have to carry out the tasks assigned to him. What worried Bali most was his brother's reaction to Karen's growing influence. Heinrich offered one last piece of advice to Bali, reminding him that Lady Sabina was very fond of Karen. Bali felt relieved to hear that. Bali expressed his feeling that the monthly allowance he sent had paid off, while Heinrich replied, expressing his happiness to see him joking and looking less worried, but Bali expressed his concern that his aunt would be leaving the castle soon. Heinrich reassured him again, explaining that Karen had formed a close relationship with the Seawolf Knights to the point that they had given him a nickname, the Little Rabid Blue Sea Dog. In the training ground, Karen appeared, training intensely, easily overcoming a huge knight named Hans. Karen scolded him for his weakness, saying that the art of the Seawolf sword is useless if you are overcome by force, and that one must fight with strength even if their bones are broken. Hans surrendered, admitting that Karen was the only one who projected his strength while Karen mocked his muscles, calling them balloon muscles. In the training ground, Hans admitted that the term balloon muscles was new to him, and acknowledged that without using mana, he was no longer a match for Karen now, lamenting how much strength the young man had gained in just 1 year. Hans then told Karen that he would likely be sent on a mission soon. Hans revealed that Sir Zeres would be the one to decide the mission's timing because Halo was currently in the capital, and he speculated that their destination would be the Celestial Dome region in the west of the duchy, where demon appearances were increasing. Nearby, Leo was training anxiously, thinking that he didn't want to go on the same mission with Karen, but at the same time he hoped to make his parents happy if he did well. Back in the present, Bali revealed to Heinrich that the reason for his summons was not just Karen's letter. Bali gave him a small pouch, explaining that their territory's gate inspectors found it in a merchant's cart coming from the barony of Bellis. Bali confirmed it was a drug called cocaine, and asked him to investigate the matter of the barony of Bellis starting from the Blue Sea Castle. At the train station, someone got off the train wondering if this was the Blue Sea Castle. That night Karen was wandering the castle grounds after having snuck in and stolen a bottle of liquor from Zeres's collection, commenting to himself that messing with Zeres's collection was always exciting. As he was enjoying his drink, he heard a visitor asking the guard for Duke Reston on an urgent matter. The guard confirmed that the Duke was in the capital, and that Knight Commander Zeres was in charge. Karen interjected in the conversation, and when the guard recognized him, the visitor introduced himself as the young Baron Rohan Bellis. Rohan recognized Karen from the rumors he had heard about him. Although Rohan's aide suggested going to the Knight Commander, Karen insisted that he would be the one to listen to his story, arguing that it was a matter of courtesy for a noble from their side to receive a visitor who had come in person on an urgent matter. Karen ordered the guard to deliver a separate message to Zeres. Karen's political judgment impressed Rohan, though Rohan was concerned to see a boy holding a bottle of liquor. He then invited Rohan to follow. In a private room, Karen summarized Rohan's problem: the presence of a group of bandits in the eastern mountains of his barony. Rohan confirmed this, adding that these bandits were spreading drugs and kidnapping people to sell as slaves. Rohan explained with regret that his baron was poor and militarily weak, and that his father's attempt to confront the bandits had failed, and resulted in him being injured and bedridden. Karen slammed the liquor bottle on the table in anger, declaring that tearing these scoundrels to pieces was not enough punishment for them, but he pointed out a puzzling point, wondering how a mere group of bandits could be strong enough to fight a regular army. Rohan replied that they suspected these bandits might actually be deserters from the Southern Kingdom's army, which was currently at war. Karen analyzed the situation, concluding that after the evil emperor's abdication, the imperial army had focused its reduced resources on the war in the south, creating a security vacuum in the north that allowed deserters to become bandits. Rohan agreed that this theory seemed the most plausible. Karen then offered Rohan a drink, explaining that the barony of Bellis was adjacent to the fathom where his father resided, making this a personal matter for him as well, and he expressed his desire to help personally. Rohan felt grateful for this gesture, though he wondered to himself about the appropriateness of accepting a drink offered by a child. Karen cheerfully admitted that the drink was stolen from Sir Zeres's collection and asked Rohan to keep it a secret between them. Rohan was shocked to hear the name of the famous Knight Commander. At that very moment, Zeres entered the room and asked Karen if they hadn't agreed that he wouldn't touch his drink. Rohan got flustered and spilled his drink, but Zeres reassured him. Zeres addressed Rohan, confirming he had heard of his grave concern about the bandits, which Rohan confirmed was the reason he came to ask for help. As Zeres was about to reply, Karen interrupted him. Zeres turned to him, scolding him for drinking at his age, and took his drink away. Zeres apologized to the young baron for the scene, then reassured him that Blue Sea Castle would not stand idly by while an old partner suffered, and told him they were planning to organize and dispatch troops soon. Karen volunteered to go on the mission, but Zeres immediately refused, arguing that the enemy was a trained group and might have unknown skilled fighters. Rohan was surprised by Karen's seriousness in wanting to help. Zars objected, knowing that real combat was different from training. Karen argued that being overprotective was not good, but Zeres insisted he would rather send him to face a clear danger in the west than an ambiguous one. At that, Karen smiled slightly and asked him what if he made him an offer he couldn't refuse. In a later scene at the train station, Leo was shocked at being forced to go on the mission, while Karen enthusiastically wrapped an arm around him, delighted that it was their first mission. Zeres, who was watching the scene, realized he had been tricked, and that Karen had used Lady Sabina as leverage. Zeres thought that perhaps this was for the best, as a reliable guardian would accompany them. Zeres realized that his agreement to the condition of Lord Leo going implicitly meant his satisfaction with the results of their training. Baron Rohan was also present to see them off, and he was very worried about the safety of the Duke's grandsons and his family's responsibility if any harm came to them. Rizz tried to reassure him and assured him that there was no need for him to worry, as he explained that with Sabina present, no harm would ever come to the boys. But Sabina interrupted him with a shocking statement, declaring that she did not intend to intervene unless the boys were in danger of death. This statement terrified Rohan and Leo. Rizz commented on her usual audacity, and Sabina hinted that there was a reason preventing her from standing on the front lines, something Rizz seemed to understand and accept. At the train station, Sabina noticed Leo trembling, so she addressed him, saying she understood his fear, but she urged him to consider this mission an opportunity to prove how serious he was about his training over the past 3 years and a chance to gain recognition as a member of the Blue Wolves. Karen interjected with his sarcastic style, wondering if Leo always needed someone to push him from behind. Leo responded angrily, but Karen's words awakened his resolve, and he realized it was time to prove himself. The magic train departed from Blue Sea Castle, heading to the barony of Bellis. As the train moved away, Karen thought to himself that he hadn't expected this moment to come so quickly. On the train, Sabina explained to Baron Rohan why she couldn't appear on the front lines. Her presence at Blue Sea Castle was a secret, and if she were discovered, the bandits would disappear without a trace. However, Rohan remained concerned about sending only 2 children on this mission, as he noticed Karen showed no signs of tension, while Leo seemed extremely anxious. Meanwhile, Leo was remembering his mother's scolding. She had asked him how he could get close to Karen after the humiliation he suffered 3 years ago, which had stained his father's honor. Assuring him that Karen was his rival, not his friend. When Leo remained silent, she called him a weak boy. Finally, Leo responded to his mother, explaining that Karen was not his rival. He explained the huge gap in talent between them, as Karen had reached the 4-star level at the age of 13, while he had only reached the 3-star level at the age of 15. Leo asserted that Karen was not his rival, but his goal that pushed him to work hard and move forward. His mother concluded their conversation by telling him that he only sees the trees, the competition, not the forest, the bigger picture. Back on the train, Sabina was talking to Leo, who admitted his nervousness as it was his first mission. Sabina asked him a direct question: could he kill a man? Leo hesitated, but Sabina encouraged him, saying there was no need to doubt himself and that she knew more than anyone how hard his training had been, reminding him that she was the one who trained him. Moved by her words, Leo addressed her as master. The train announced its arrival in 20 minutes, so Sabina decided that during the mission, they would address each other as master and student. She then announced she would jump from the train to go ahead and scout the situation unnoticed. Rohan protested the danger of jumping from a moving train, but Sabina reassured him that he would not be held accountable for anything, because her nephews would be watching him from a distance. Karen commented with admiration on her audacity, and Sabina jumped from the train, leaving Rohan and Leo in a state of shock, wondering about the eccentricities of the Liston family. Upon their arrival at the barony of Bellis, they were greeted by Rohan's father, the injured Baron Bellis, who apologized for receiving them while seated due to his poor health. Karen replied politely, asking him not to worry about it, and asked about his injuries. Upon meeting the bedridden Baron Bellis, the Baron thanked the boys for their concern, and mentioned that he had met Karen and his father 10 years ago, commenting on how wonderfully he had grown, which must make his father proud. Karen, who was not comfortable with formalities, asked the Baron to speak simply with him, and the Baron agreed to call him young Master Karen. The Baron showed keen insight, deducing that since Karen had been assigned his first mission, he must have reached the 4-star level in the martial arts at such a young age. The Baron expressed his confidence in the main house's judgment of the boy's abilities, but at the same time he felt concerned about sending 2 promising young men on such a dangerous mission. Karen reassured the Baron, saying he understood his concern, but failure in their missions would stain the honor of the Blue Wolves, and that they never consider failure. He then turned to Leo for confirmation, and Leo reluctantly agreed that they would definitely succeed. The Baron laughed and thanked them for their confidence. Karen noticed that the Baron needed rest and announced that they would be leaving. The Baron entrusted the matter to them and told them he had prepared a guide for them to follow. The boy set off with the guide through the snowy mountains. Karen mocked Leo, wondering if he was already tired, but Leo ignored him and expressed his distrust of the guide, pointing out that there was no guarantee he wasn't colluding with the bandits. Karen sarcastically congratulated him on finally being able to think, then calmly confirmed that Leo's suspicions were correct, and that the guide was most likely one of the bandits. Leo was shocked and asked how he knew. Karen explained that he had overheard Baron Rohan's conversation at the station. In a flashback, Rohan's aide asked how they would locate the bandits' hideout, and Rohan replied that they would have to use a traitor within the domain. When Leo asked him why he hadn't told him earlier, Karen replied that he had been tense all day. Karen then analyzed the situation, pointing out Rohan's cunning in deliberately using the traitor against them, and explained to Leo that their current role was to be bait, as their kidnapping as young nobles would fetch a high ransom. Karen explained to Leo that the fact the traitor remained unpunished and alive until now was proof of this, which meant they had reached the point of desperation. The guide Sven led them into an ambush set by the bandit leader, who rewarded him with an extra sum because the targets were young nobles. One of the bandits noted that the two young men didn't look like they would follow them obediently. Karen and Leo stood ready to fight, and Karen declared with intense anger that he would not forgive them for spreading drugs in his father's land. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.